Hello everyone and welcome to Dev Workflow. So this is going to tie together a few different habits and maybe help you put together some pieces of the quality puzzle. I wanted you to have a couple of these projects under your belt, some solo stuff, some group stuff, so you'd have something to draw on when we started talking about what a quality development workflow looks like. So first, let's start kind of high ratio. I'm going to throw out a question in inbox. Go ahead and head over there. And I'm going to ask you two questions. First question is going to be, what are some things across the different projects that you've done, your solo stuff and your group stuff, that you think has worked especially well? They're like, yeah, I want to make sure I keep doing that. So question is, what has worked well so far? Okay, questions posted. What has worked well so far in terms of how you frame the work, what order you do things in, what stuff you don't worry about, what stuff you do worry about, what's gone pretty well? Let's take a couple minutes on that. Welcome, Sarah. Why don't you head over to inbox? We're talking about, in all of the projects you've done, solo or group, what has worked well for you so far in terms of like process? All right, 4 minutes on the clock. Another 2 minutes. Another couple seconds. All right, send me what you got. All right, I'm missing 9. Okay, while I'm waiting for the other 8 responses, some things that I want to call out on this. A couple of you have mentioned that styling as you go works especially well. That's legit. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. I also see that a couple of you have pointed out that it tends to go a little bit better if you draw something first. Also highly recommend that. And a lot of this is heavily focused on like how you write the code. Things like driver navigator handoff, like a couple of those kinds of things. And that's good. We also want to zoom out a little bit and think about how these projects kind of get approached, in addition to like our kind of minute-to-minute thing. Everybody's answers were great so far. Just doing some contextualizing. Okay, I don't know why we're missing this many responses, but I want to ask you another one.
Just out of curiosity, because I could see that mine's an activity. Can you see mine? I just want to see if it's a sense error or what's going on.
I got yours.
Oh, okay. I was like, man, I double checked. My computer's slow.
Okay, you probably saw this coming. Opposite of that. What has not worked well, either in your individual or group projects? Some stuff. Maybe you don't even have a great answer for how you could do it better, but you're like, this it seems to keep happening, and I would like it to happen less. I don't think it's especially helpful. Let's take a couple minutes on that. What has not worked so well? few more minutes. Another minute. Oh, these are gold. All right, pencils down. Send me what you got. Lots of you mentioning styling at the end. Doesn't work so good. We're going to talk about that. Quite a few of you mentioning having a hard time asking for help. That's a pretty good self-aware thing also. Some folks mentioning that not understanding what you need to build very well first. Just diving right in. It's the hallmark of being new. Excellent. So let me draw out what I usually see as what most folks do in this situation. I think most student projects I've seen tend to go write some stuff, and then the first time you hit a blocker, somebody thinks to go, wait, what are we building again? So then understand what you're building, optionally start over again when you realize you've been building the exact wrong thing. And then the next thing I tend to see is starting a bunch of things, not really finishing very much. And the kinds of things that folks tend to do when they're doing this, I call layered development. So that might be, we haven't done any back-end stuff yet, but a lot of times that's, I need to do all the database stuff. And then I'm going to lay out all the back end. And then I'm going to write all the functions for the front end. And then I'm going to do all the HTML. And then, with whatever time I have left, which is none, I'm going to style. And then I'm going to test. Hard to imagine why stuff doesn't tend to get tested very much. So this idea is that you're going usually from the back of the application to the front, working in these huge chunks. We got to get all the database, all the back end, all the front end, all the HTML, then all the styles, then all the tests. And then once you've done that for the entire app, then you deploy it. Optionally, which means not really, write your README, documentation, any of that kind of stuff, and then move on. Probably looks kind of familiar. So that's a pretty intuitive way, I think, to do most projects. And even like in non-software stuff that you've built, you probably did something kind of like this, where you started some stuff and go, ah, wait a minute, I got to get my head around this. And I actually don't hate this part of it all that much. I think that there's some validity to that. But we got to do all the understanding, and then all of this work, we do it in these huge chunks. Then we deploy it all. Oh, I left out the part where we spend like half a day debugging because as soon as you deployed it, everything broke. And then, yeah, then you do all this chore stuff at the end that doesn't actually end up happening. So I'd like to present an alternate way to approach these projects. So as a step one, actually we'll call it a step 0, spend some time understanding the problem and specifically breaking it into stories. Can I get a volunteer to give us a refresher on stories? Give it your best shot. What is a user story?
Something the user wants. They
Yes.
want a database or an app, and you try to build it to the way they want it.
Well, you're providing the benefit that they need. So users don't care about databases. Users don't care
No.
about backends. They don't care about forms. They care about, I have a problem, my problem gets solved.
And I want this button to work.
Right. And they don't even care if it's a button. Like, they want the thing that the button gets them. So I want to be able to order shoes. They don't give a shit if it's a button or a drop down or like a voice to text thing or whatever. They have the problem of not having shoes, and they want that to be solved by getting shoes. So everything in between that is some kind of friction on that. And so we try to make these apps that make that friction like as low as possible, help them get precisely the thing they want. But it's all in that domain. It's like, I want to be able to select a shoe and then have it shipped to my house and pay for that easily. Those are all things that users care about. That it's on 3 different pages or 1 different page or 10 different pages, they don't care about that. So our user stories are focused on what the benefit to the user is. So if I take the one from yesterday, let's see, this is Pokemon Library TypeScript Edition. Okay, so first user story is showing a list of Pokemon. I want to be able to see a list of Pokemon. So in the Connextra format, that might be, as a user, I want to see a list of Pokemon so that I can see which Pokemon are available. All right, so there's the user story. Next thing that we want to do with that is and I think this is a little bit counterintuitive. So this has 2 user stories. We don't need to get all the user stories for like everything that the app might do. That doesn't need to be done up front. We want to know enough to decide what's the most important. And so details about a single Pokemon or showing a list of them. Stories are supposed to be order independent. I think this one is probably easier. I could be talked into that, but you pick one and you go, okay, well, this gives me something to start with. And then this is where it starts getting a little bit counterintuitive. At that point, we don't break it into these layers like this. We do a thin vertical slice of all of that. We want just enough database, just enough backend, just enough HTML and CSS and testing, all of it for that story. And furthermore, we really want, like, as part of the first story, we generally also end up bootstrapping the application. So what I mean by that, nothing to do with the styling framework Bootstrap. What I mean is, at this point, set up the dev environment, make a guess at the folder structure. You might get it wrong, that's fine. It doesn't need to be for everything you will ever do, just enough. Set up your testing framework. Set up deployment. Do your README. This is before you've even like really done anything for the app. After you've like picked a story that you're going to work on, a trick that I'll use a lot is like if I'm making a web app, the first story is something like I can identify the app. So like the Sika one, it was just this. That was like my first user story. Is like, as a potential customer of Sika Education, I want to find out what they're about. So there was my first feature. Now, the thing that's kind of hidden in that is to get this far, I had to set up deployment. I had to set up the files. I had to get my dev environment going. I had to do a lot of these kinds of like chore sorts of things. I did not have to do all that much software development. So that gave me an opportunity to sort of split out some of those tasks while still doing something that somebody would reasonably find valuable. But this stands in pretty big contrast to this, where we deploy everything at the end. We do all the documentation at the end. We do all the testing at the end, that sort of stuff. Another thing that like I will do as part of this process is build a design system. So this is picking colors, picking typefaces, some of that stuff you normally think of as styling. Well, it's supposed to work as part of like a whole system around the application. So I do as little work as I can get away with on that up front. Usually that's having some kind of primary color at least, usually a few different shades of that, having some kind of grayscale thing, like a handful of grays. Sometimes that's picking like my typeface hierarchy, going with an overall vibe. Like I might look through websites, get some ideas for, do I want this to feel modern and spacious? Do I want it to feel formal? Making some of those decisions. All of that is part of bootstrapping your application. And before I move on, questions about these first two ideas?
You think this might be a dumb question?
Yeah.
Do you think you could like explain a dev environment, like what that means?
Sure. This is stuff like getting, making sure your parcel works, making sure your testing stuff works. This is like, to some extent, your folder structure. This is also like those scripts, like your build script, your like local development script, how you're deploying. Are you using something that has like live reload? All of those kinds of things that you, getting like your TypeScript compiler working however you want. Is Parcel doing that? Are you compiling the TypeScript separately? Those kinds of things are all part of setting up your developer environment.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Kyle, my question is something you said a little bit earlier. You said that you don't need, you even said that it was counterintuitive, that
Yeah.
you might not necessarily need to hit all the user stories at once or,
Yes.
By the end of it.
Right.
So I guess you're saying, to determine what's the most important, but if the user stories want, like if there's a user story for something, that obviously means they want it, right? So
Right.
would we not be unsatisfying the user at the end of it?
Really good question. So here's the reality of this. If I'm a user and I want 10 things, and you give me all of 3 of them, I'm in much better shape than if you give me a working database and a backend and some functions. I mean, for the whole app, for all 10 of them, that's nothing. This is 3 things. This is 0 things, effectively. And this kind of has to do with our like working in like complete units sort of idea. This is what a thin vertical slice is. 3 entire features is way more valuable than 10 kind of half-started features. Or I got you all 10 features, but they don't have any styles and they might not work. That's not so valuable.
Wouldn't that also be a good time to check in with them to see if those 3 are working great?
Yes.
As they expected?
Yes.
Okay.
And so if you can check in after each of these and go, all right, the absolute most important thing you wanted, I got that wrapped up. How's this looking? And so maybe they go, yes, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Keep going. Or it might be, that's close. I want to kind of tweak it these sorts of ways. Or it might be, no, that's fine, but something new came up. There's a new competitor's product. There's a new technology that we want to take advantage of. I just changed my mind about what the next most important thing is. And so now we haven't started a bunch of work on that. We've finished something, which is fast. Now that we've finished something, we have the flexibility to figure out what the next thing we want to start is. If we start everything at the beginning, it doesn't change how fast we can finish things, but it does take some choices away from us. And those are very handy choices to have. There's another way to think of this. If you think of traditional project management as we do all the understanding, so it's like your scoping stuff, then we do all the planning, we do all the development, we do all the testing, we do all the deployment. So like most of the time this is called waterfall. And it's because once you've done all of the scoping, we fall down the waterfall. We don't swim back up that. Now we do all the planning. Once that's over, we don't do any more planning. We do all the development. And so we can't go back up the waterfall. Once a phase is over, we don't really go back to that phase. In contrast, this agile approach that we're taking has us kind of doing all of these for some small piece of it. This is helping us speed up the feedback loop. This is keeping options open for things like, I don't know, global pandemics that might change what is and isn't important. So we keep some flexibility there. Now, like a minor distinction I want to make on this, doing these 5 things in order, but just doing it over and over again, that's not agile. It's closer, but agile is all of these things happening all of the time, not in discrete steps. Small distinction to make. But that's what we're trying to do here, is have something that is finished, complete, not done but. Not, oh, I have everything except the documentation. I have everything except the tests. Like done, 100% for something small. Questions about that?
How would you say that we should juggle this kind of task management without falling into the bogs of multitasking, which we've talked about in previous habits of excellence?
Absolutely. So this is kind of naturally resistant to that because this thin vertical slice, like for example, this one, that's all we're doing. We're not looking ahead. We're not also worried about this story. We're trying to stay focused on this much smaller thing. Now, within that, we might learn new things about it. We might go, oh, I got a cool new idea. Let's plan this real quick. That might come while you're in the middle of deving something, might come in the middle or the end. You generally write your tests first, and deployment generally happens automatically. And so that's why these things are a little bit more of a miasma than just phases, but it's not so many different things that we're multitasking. It's, I think of it as like driving with the headlights on at night. You can't see past your headlights. Tends to get you where you need to go, though. Other questions so far? Cool. For each story that you work on, figure out what the acceptance criteria are. This is another thing that keeps you from blowing a story up or gold plating or something like that. How will you know what done is? These are acceptance criteria. If I'm on the home page, then I see 50 Pokemon. If that happens, I'm done. Not, oh, and a search feature would be cool. And when you click on them, they do this. And. Just that. That's how we keep the slice thin. So when we figured out what these acceptance criteria are, that's when we can start working on the story. So some things that you do as a part of working on a story. Most common first step of this in agile environments, including at Ford, is figure out your tests. So tests are just the code version of your acceptance criteria. So like, that's acceptance criteria. The test for that would be automate a browser, navigate it to this home page, assert that 50 Pokemon show up on it. I haven't taught you how to write those kinds of tests. Those are like your end-to-end or UI or higher level tests. We don't use Jest for stuff like that usually. But those are the test cases that when those are green, that lets us know that this story is complete. So we want to write our test cases. Another thing that I'll do as a part of this is draw the interface. Hey, that takes us back to Unit 1, right? That's also part of that, your content inventory. What kinds of things are going to be on this page? And so maybe that's All right, I got this. And I don't know, do I want them to be tiles? Do I want them to be listings? Something else? A grid? Figure out like what this is going to be. Figure out what needs to be on the page. This is one of the things that I'll usually prove out in some of that like first story where I'm bootstrapping the app. But is there a logo on the page? Is there legal stuff? Whatever it is. That's when that happens. Once you've drawn the interface, write the HTML for it. Now, this is a thing that I'll bet you're not doing. You are totally capable of this, though, and I highly recommend it. It sounds silly, but like, I don't know. I literally do this. What's your excuse? When you're writing out the HTML, fake out the data. Hard code. So when I'm writing out the HTML for this, I usually just pick one Pokemon and like, these are just 50 Pikachus or something like that. But like, actually write out what that data would look like in the HTML. Well, it'd be an image tag and its source would be this URL. Its alt text would be this. It would have an H2 that says Pikachu on it. Like hard code out all that HTML.
I'll say that was really helpful for me on Gilded Rose
Yes.
to have that all done. So I
Hell
can second
yeah. Love that. And then style it. This should probably be like the end of your CSS for this story. Like when you're working in layers, you tend to push that stuff toward the end. Nope. Do that first. For that story, not for your entire app, just for this one story. But take your hard-coded data in your HTML, style it. So by the end of this step, it should look the way that it's going to look. If somebody just looked over your shoulder, they would go, oh, wow, you're already done with that feature? It's not interactive. It's not dynamic. But it looks the way that it's going to look. This is so much easier to do when you're not also worried about the HTML, or the JavaScript parts of that, and API integration and all this other kind of shit. I forgot something on Bootstrap the app. Deploy. It is so much easier to deploy an app that doesn't do anything. We don't have to troubleshoot images. We don't have to troubleshoot file paths. We don't have to do any kind of weird stuff. Can you get nothing to deploy? Just have a repo with an HTML page. Can it show up? Then if you go, oh, I just pushed up this first feature, and it's weird, the images don't work. Now you can isolate that. You can go, oh, well, it deployed fine when it was just some text. It's only these assets. Now we can kind of debug from there and go, all right, well, where is it trying to get these assets? Did I put them in the wrong folder? Did I write the path wrong? Kind of the only two things it could be. All right, so we're working the story. We style it. We have our tests. We have our content inventory. We have a drawn interface. We wrote the HTML. We styled it. Still haven't done any like JavaScript-y kinds of things yet. No code. Just this part of it. So as you're continuing to work this, we have these tests, and there's something I'm not going to talk about today, but there's a particular testing technique called double loop testing that I like a lot. So if this is our test, so navigate a browser to the home page, assert that those 50 Pokemon show up. That's a big loop. And then you have inner loops inside of that. You go, okay, well, that's a mouthful. So what's a smaller thing that I can do? And that would be something like if I already have a list of like an array of 50 Pokemon objects, I can make them, turn them into DOM elements. If I have a thing of DOM elements, I can put them on the page. And so those are all smaller tests. And the idea is that you keep going as small tests on tests on tests. And when all of your smallest tests pass, all of your medium tests pass, and then the whole thing passes. It's called double loop testing. So we'll talk about that more another time. But the idea is that we're using these tests as our fast feedback mechanism. Are we making progress? Have we seen these big outer tests go green? Even if we don't have them automated. So like I haven't taught you how to write browser tests. That's fine. What if you were just doing this by hand? How would you know that it works? What steps would you go to? Well, I would go to the home page, I would hit refresh, and that would verify that there's 50 Pokemon showing up. Cool. That's your outer loop. Keep coming back to that. But that's test-driven development. We're using our acceptance criteria to drive. We're not writing code that a test isn't like barking at us to write. So we test drive. The goal of this is to take all these red failing tests and make them pass. Now, the code does not have to be good. In fact, it usually shouldn't be. You're trying to get to green however you can, quick and dirty. Shortcuts, sloppy code. Not badly indented code, mind you, not poorly named variables necessarily. All those things that I tell you are like turning on hard mode, where it's not that kind of stuff. It's more things like, there might be a more elegant way to write this. I might benefit from splitting this up. I might benefit from combining this. Those kinds of like big design decisions, don't worry about them when you're just trying to get something to work. Once they're all green, refactor. That's a tricky one to like remember to do, because you get such a dopamine hit from getting your shit passing and like, oh my god, there's 50 Pokemon showing up on the page, that you just want to move on to the next thing. Clean up after yourself before you move on. Keeping something green, way easier than getting it green in the first place. So we can make these teeny tiny changes to improve the quality of our code while continuing to keep it green. So we hard-coded out all this stuff here. Part of this TDD process is keep it the same. It should look the same throughout all of this stuff because we styled it, the data's there, but you can do things like it's hard-coded in the HTML. Okay, well, I'm going to extract that stuff out and hard-code it in the JS. Still not coming from an API. It's still a hard-coded array of objects or whatever. It might be 50 Pikachus. Can I get those to render on the page? Awesome. Instead of hard-coding that array, can I get it to come from an API? Let's say you wrote the API. All you do is copy and paste your hard-coded array of objects from your client side to your API. Don't pull it out of a database. Does that work? If that works, all right, cool. Instead of hard-coding this data, can I pull it out of a database? So you're continuing to try to, that's interactive. We start with something hard-coded immediately where it is, and then we just gradually pull it back and back and back. And the reason we do this is because if there's a problem at any step of the way, now we've localized it. If it was fine when we hard-coded the HTML, but when I move that into an array of objects, it doesn't work anymore, I don't need to worry about the API. I don't need to worry about the database. I don't need to worry about the fetch logic or any of that shit, because I know that's not the problem. If it's working with hard-coded data here, but as soon as I'm fetching that from an API, it stops working, cool. I've already narrowed down where the problem happened. That's the benefit of starting with the end in mind and gradually pushing that data further and further back to where it will eventually live. So then our last step, once this feature is done, release. Push it up to GitHub. It's on GitHub pages. Done. Push it up to Netlify. It's published. Done. But it's not a phase. It's not something we wait until the end to do. It's something we're always doing. And what eventually happens when you keep working this way, we do a thin vertical slice. We do a thin vertical slice. We do a thin vertical slice. We do a thin and then we run out of time. And so we go, okay, cool. Scrap that. And cool, we got 3 features done. Not, oh yeah, or as my oldest would go, oh dear, just slamming, trying to get everything styled, trying to get all the tests ready, and this whole fucking panic. You can't do more than you can do. And so if what you could do is 3 stories, yeah, I got half of this one started, throw it out. We're calling it a 3-story app. Having 5 completed things is better than having 10 started things. Starting things feels fast. Finishing things is fast. That is like a pretty by-the-books extreme programming development workflow. Ask me some questions about it.
If we wanted to look more into it, what would be a good source for that?
Sure. I'd go to XP Explained. That's kind of the canonical book. This one right here. Big part of the overall philosophy is taken from this very modern-looking website. We'll talk more about the manifesto one of these days. But the thing that I just described is a pretty opinionated way of like how you work through this and the role that the tests play in sort of pushing the work forward and defining what the endpoint is and doing all of that up front. That's a specific interpretation of this called extreme programming, and that's the canonical book for it. In case you were wondering, it's not like sponsored by Mountain Dew or something like that. The reason it's called extreme programming is in this building up the layers thing. I mean, there is still plenty of software that gets made that way, and it is still the traditional way to make software, as is this like kind of waterfall-y way to do it. And those people will go, oh yeah, writing tests is a good idea. Oh yeah, like doing your styling as you go, that's a good idea. And so the XP approach to it is, okay, if it's a good idea, why aren't we doing it all the time? If writing tests helps us make better code, why are we never not writing tests? Don't we want to write good code? And so it's taking all of these things that most people agree are good ideas and taking them to the extreme. And there's also some other parts of the philosophy that don't necessarily relate purely to a dev workflow. There are things like how you interact with your customers and what importance using the particular blessed tools of the company are. And like XP really focuses on extreme ownership. So XP teams are self-managing. They don't get told what to make. They get given problems, and then they figure out what the best way to make that is. But in the foreword to this book, like I think he puts it really well, where it's really easy and common in software teams for teams to write just trash, just awful software that does not make anyone happy And they go, well, we got bad requirements. Yeah, that was stupid. We made some stupid software, but I don't know. Those were the tickets that came in. I just made the software they told me to make. That's really demoralizing. Like, there's not very many years I think you can make in this industry just doing shit like that. So instead, the XP approach is I go to the software team and I go, customer has this problem. And the software team goes, all right, I think that the best way that we could serve that problem is this. And then you prioritize it, and then you work on it. And so at the end of that, if the software sucks, that's a lot more personal. You can't blame that on the project manager who had unrealistic expectations. You can't blame that on how poorly written the spec was. You can't blame that on anything but yourself. They came to you with a problem and you came up with a shitty solution to it. That should be embarrassing. But part of that is if you're going to have that level of ownership and pride of the work, you also have to control how it gets done. It's not reasonable to both take orders and have ownership. Those are opposite ideas. So it's extreme for a team to own their work to that degree. That's XP. Other questions about this?
One of the hardest things for me to wrap my head around for this is setting up the deployment ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
That seems kind of like a foreign concept. So the idea here is that we actually deploy, if not a totally blank site, a trash site, and fix it up.
Not necessarily trash, just not that much.
Right.
So here, I'll demonstrate it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. All right, I've got to do this stupid Pokédex thing for Old Man Coberly. So I go, okay, blank slate. Nothing up this sleeve, nothing up that sleeve. So if I go over this list, understand the problem, broken into stories, done already. Next step, bootstrap the app. So this is going to need an index HTML and an index CSS. Why don't I put those in a source folder so I can keep it separate from the rest of my stuff. So I move anything that starts with index over there. I'm going to need a README. That's probably enough to get started. And then I also want like my tests in place. So maybe I put the JavaScript file there or the TypeScript file or whatever. I initialize the package JSON. I install Jest. Maybe I also install Parcel. And then once all that's in there, I want to make sure that's all wired up. So I might say, all right, let's make, this is part of setting up your development environment. My test command is Jest. My start command is Parcel. Oh, you guys are going to flip on this. Check this shit out. Learned that one today. That will run Parcel on all of your HTML files. Cool. Let's see if it works. By npm no. By npm start. Got that going. Localhost 1234. Beautiful. And hey, it already found a problem. So I'm getting this because I pointed to, I didn't tell it where the files were. Now I don't also worry that like, oh, maybe the JavaScript screwed it up. Maybe I linked something wrong. I haven't done any of that. That can't be the problem. It's probably more like that. Maybe. Oh, it's because I changed the script, but gotta rerun it. All right, there we go. That's what I'm hoping to see. And then over here,
Can you go back to that package JSON real fast so we can write that down?
I'm going to talk
Thanks.
about more in the modules lesson too, but
Okay.
that's the magic trick there. So then this is going to have the doc type and the HTML. And again, we're not writing bad code. I think that's a really frequently misunderstood thing about anything that's done in like an XP style. It's not writing bad code. It's writing very good but very little code. This would also be a totally reasonable time to get like your favicon going. By the time you're done with this, maybe you also want to check your accessibility. Is there a problem that's with the accessibility here that we can deal with now before we start adding a bunch of shit to it? I already have a title. If I'm going to have a problem linking a style sheet, way rather know that before I like do all this stuff, right? A lot of you were having trouble yesterday with like script type module. A lot easier to like debug that kind of stuff when there's no actual JavaScript that it has to do. Module in a sec. Source. Okay, so we got all that, and then I might say, does this show up? I don't know why that's not auto-loading. There we go. Okay, so I got something showing up on the page, and then I look over at my sketch, and I go, all right, it's got like a logo there, and then a grid of these things. So part of this bootstrapping thing is like our design system. So about now is when I would figure out some typography. So I want something that's kind of playful. Maybe bangers, why not? And import it in. And say that my H1 should be font family bangers with a fallback to cursive. All right, making progress. I might also like throw in a reset here. Meantime, I'll just reset the padding and margin. And then immediately override it. So we'll say this is like padding of 32 pixels. That's going to drive me nuts that that doesn't auto reload. More. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. I'm going to step this back down. Cool. No JavaScript to worry about. And over here, I wanted like a grid of Pokemon. Well, that's probably going to have to live in some kind of Pokemon list. Notice that I'm writing HTML, so that's kebab case. It's that. It's not that. It's not that. It's not anything else. Classes should be kebab case. So I do that. And then each one of the Pokemon in here will be like a Pokemon listing. And each one of them will have an image. And if I go over to the Poke API, grab one of those sprites. And it's got a name like that. Okay, so I want something sort of like that, but I want like a ton of them. And I want them to show up in a grid. So I also want a typeface that'll work for that. Let's see if it gave me suggested pairings. Sometimes it does. Nope. All right, so I want some kind of sans serif fun thing. If I haven't shown you this before, this is like the life hack for Google Fonts. When you're trying to find a good typeface has a ton of different styles. And so if we like raise this thing to 12, it filters out all the amateur hour stuff. It's like all four of these are like classic typefaces. So if I do something like Nanito, and pull in a regular for that. This still has my bangers one in there. So I'll just replace my import. Say the body should also use font family Nanito, fall back to sans serif. Much better. And then I want each of those Pokemon listings to kind of look like, oh, I don't know, a Pokemon listing. So that's going to be, see, I'm going to flex it. So I'm flexing inside of the container, so it'll be like each card. I want it to be flex flow, column, no wrap. I want to align items center. I also want the p tags in there to be text align, center, and I'm going to step up the weight on those too. So that'll be like font weight 700. Yeah, something kind of like that. All right, and then I want them to show up in like a big, one other thing. I'm going to do like box shadow, and something kind of like that. And then I want to have this whole Pokemon list in a grid. Actually, give me just a second. I'll be right back.
Right now, this is the lamest Pokedex out there. It's just Pikachu.
They're playing Pokemon Yellow. It's fine.
Thank you. So I make this a grid, and maybe I want like grid template columns. Oh, there's 5 columns. Oops. And there's 10 rows. Maybe something kind of like that. See if these auto place themselves. Nope. Pokemon list. So then I can inspect this. I want to take a look at the grid. Oh, it's weird how it collapsed it. Oh, it's because I got the syntax wrong. Invalid property value. Is it the other way around? Might be. There we go. All right, cool. Let's get one more in there. And then maybe I want these to grid spacing, row gap, 2 M's. All right, cool. So like that's my grid. My app is going to be something kind of like this. So like at this point, I'd probably deploy that. So I go, all right, I want to get init this. It's got node modules. I want to ignore those. I also want to ignore that parcel cache. I want to ignore the dist folder. Oh, I guess I need that for... no, I don't. I'm going to show you how to do a Netlify deploy. I have a guide for it in the thing, but that'll help. So I'm also going to ignore that dist folder. All right, cool. Probably should have made a couple of other commits in there along the way too. Okay, so I do that. I add the origin, push it up, head over to Netlify. Import a project, connect to GitHub. Look for Pokedex. Cool, deploy the master branch. The base directory is the root. The command to build is parcel build, and it goes into the dist directory. Looks about right. Cool, so that's working on a deployment right now. While we're waiting on that, and keep cranking, let's take a look at this list. Set up a dev environment? Yeah, more or less. Folder structure? Yeah, more or less. Setting up testing? Yeah, kind of. So I could like make a test directory here and touch like test.app.spec.ts. Does my npm test command work for that? Yep.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Why did you use Netlify instead of just deploying it through GitHub?
So, because we're going to start moving to Netlify for all our deploys, because all GitHub will do is serve up files. It won't run build commands or any of that kind of stuff, and we need that for Angular. And boy, is it nice to have on stuff that we do with Parcel. All right, site deploy failed. Why? Build script returned non-zero exit code. A zero exit code is a good thing. Okay, the partial build command failed. Oh, and you know what? I know why. So now, when there isn't a million other things going on in this project, I can troubleshoot this shit. And I can say that it's actually partial build source / whatever.html. And then this is kind of a neat thing. Whenever I push up a change, it'll redeploy it. That's called continuous delivery. All right, so I want to test that my tests work. Expect true to be true. Oops. All right, so I've added that folder, add tests, push it up. Okay, so that goes up, and then, hey, look, already it's starting to deploy it. So, cool, that's going. Let's take a look at that list again. Got it, got it, got it. Working on it right now. README. It's pretty reasonable. Pokédex app. I might put build instructions here. I might put a searchable list of Pokemon. To build it, run npm run build, local development, deployed uh-oh. Okay, so this one failed. Let's see why. Still have that that thing in there. So I get rid of that. Let's see, did it give me my URL yet? I don't think so. Oops, crap, that's not gonna work. Cancel. And it will be there maybe? No. All right, I'm gonna leave that blank for now. Remove main key, add readme. All right, so that pushes back up. But yeah, and all these build failures, I don't have to worry that it's something else. The site doesn't even do anything yet. All right, so while that's going, back to the list. Got a README, design system, started working on that. Deploy, we're getting that going. Acceptance criteria given to us. Working the story, so we drew the interface. I'm not gonna do the browser tests. I wrote out the HTML, I faked out the data, I styled it. And so the next thing I'm gonna do is start pushing all of that hard-coded stuff back up the stack. Hey, looks like it went. Cool. So now that works. I can grab that URL, put it there. Add deployed link to README. Push that up. Then over here, I'm going to go into this index.html, and I want to pull out this hard-coded data and turn it into hard-coded data in JavaScript instead of HTML. So my pieces of data that I need are a name that kind of looks like that and a image URL. So I go Pokemon list is an array of objects that have a name and an image URL. So I grab that. Let's see, 47. All right, there we go. So I have this list of 50 Pokemon, and then I need some way to turn those into elements. So I say like Pokemon list dot map Pokemon make a div. Set the divs, enter HTML. Oh, where can I find the HTML that I need for this? Oh, how about here? You just copy and paste it out of the HTML. And then these, oh, well, I can just hard code that in here, can't I? Oops. So that should actually be Pokemon dot image URL. This should be Pokemon.name. And that should be Pokemon.name. All right, so I do that. That's my deployed one. That's still looking good. Now I need to take this thing that I've mapped over and add each of those elements to the page. I don't need to also debug a weird fetch thing or anything like that. Oh, the div also is supposed to have a class, I think. Class list dot add Pokemon listing. I can take all of these. These all live in the Pokemon list. I can take Pokemon list dot append Pokemon. Should be a for each. All right, now can I delete all of this and see the same thing that I saw before? Nope. That means I've narrowed down what went wrong. Structure of the HTML was fine. Styles were fine. None of that was the problem. So now we've got something that we can like reasonably deploy. All right, so is it because of this index.html? That looks okay to me. This doesn't look like a module. So if I'm debugging, did I get this far? Okay, got that far. That's a good sign. Did it successfully find its way through that map? Cool. Got that far 50 times. That's what we want to see. Did it get to the end of that? Yes, it did. So now, what is the Pokemon list and what is Pokemon? All right, so the Pokemon list looks good. Pokemon listing kind of looks all right too. So let's see what actually ended up showing up inside of here. Hey, we do have 50 things in there. Ah, but it's missing all of that because that is not how you spell that property. So much easier to debug this stuff, little by little by little. Okay, so I got 50 Pikachu showing up now. Sick. That seems like a mighty fine place for a commit. Extract hard-coded HTML to hard-coded JS. Push that up. Now that's also deployed. Next step. Instead of having a hard-coded list, can I do this with something that I'm pulling from an API? So maybe I go fetch pokeapi.co/api/v2/pokemon/Pikachu. Or no, I want that. And then it was like, oh shoot. Trying to think, I don't want to do the whole nested thing. I do want to get to modules. I'll say, all right, so Pikachu. And then, oops. Response.json. I'll call it Pokemon. Okay, so I have this Pokemon response back. If I want to turn like the list of the Pokemon that I got back, let's say I just want to replace what this is, except it's coming from the API. So I have this one Pokemon that I get back. I can do, let's see, array. That should just give me an array with 50 empty items in it that I can map over and just return. Name is Pokemon.name. And then image URL is Pokemon.sprites.front default. Maybe something like that. And then I want to do all the rest of this. That was the map. So now I should be able to get rid of this hard-coded list and have all that stuff still work. Moment of truth. Some went wrong. It's not array. I thought it was array fill. What if I do it as a literal. Okay, no error that time. That's a step. Did it get to this place? No. That's kind of what we're looking for. Do I need to do it that way? Huh, maybe it's... Can I do it that way? Just make a fixed size empty array. Yeah, that's what I thought. Oh, maybe I need to do it that way. Array of 50 dot fill. Whatever, doesn't matter. There we go. Hey, look, they came back from the API. We know that because they're not title cased. Then I can say, all right, that's supposed to be the Pokemon's name, and make a function called title case that takes in a string and then does, however we've been doing that, turn string dot split. Oh shoot, that wasn't it. Slice.
You could start your modules class and just use Lodash to do it with capitalize. But
no, what was the slice way? Anybody remember off the top of your head?
It's going to be strings, slice 0 to uppercase.
That's right. And then join it with...
Yeah.
Something kind of like that. So I do that, and womp womp. What did I do wrong on this? Oop.
I think you might have to invoke.
You are correct. Something like that. Need to tell it that I only want one. There we go. Cool. So now I got that working. Baby steps, small stuff. So now the commit is integrate with API. So at each step of the way, it's done. If I call time and the project is over and this is what you have, that's better than having a bunch of functions written, not connected to something, it's unstyled, yet both features started, neither of them finished. At every step of the way, you're done. Run out of time, only had time for 3 features, that's the best case scenario.
Is there a point at which you would have tested prior to now, or are you still pre-testing phase?
That's a good point. So what where I would have started testing is after I got the layout done, but before I'd written any JavaScript. So like I probably wouldn't test, maybe I would. Back when I had that hard-coded list of Pokemon, maybe I start the tests around then and assert that like 50 things show up on the page so that as I'm changing those, rather than refreshing the browser and like seeing the stuff there, the testing framework is giving me that feedback, but it's otherwise doing the same thing. And then like a good example of like an inner loop is I might have written a unit test for that title case function. That's this process. I've got the stuff passing. Maybe a look at refactoring. Like, gotta get rid of these console logs. Anything inside of one of these functions is like a great candidate for extraction. So this one takes a Pokemon and returns a div. So maybe the function is Pokemon to listing. Takes in a Pokemon, and it's all of this. Oops. And so then this becomes my Pokemon to listing thing. This one in here might be like add Pokemon to page. And it takes in a Pokemon listing and does that. And then this becomes add Pokemon to page. Or this one is something like let's see, what would the thing there be? So I might call this like a normalization, where it's like normalize Pokemon, or let's say deserialize. And that takes in whatever thing I get back from the API and then turns it into this. So that's that. And then this is return deserialized Pokemon for all of those. Okay, that sure looks a whole lot better. All of this code is certainly a lot easier to like understand and debug and work with. And so like maybe my test is giving me fast feedback on this stuff. I'm confident that's still working because it's easier to keep something working than it is to make something work. And then this is refactor Pokemon listing. And so like, if that's as far as I get, like there's no better way I could have spent the time. You run out of time, that's what you get. It's fine. Better than having, oh, I just got everything set up. All I have is some functions. All I have is a data schema. That's not as much progress as this is. And if we think of it as, if this was the starter code that I gave you, and now you have to finish out the rest of that feature, or you have to add another feature, it's so much easier to do it with this. Why can't you give that to yourself? That's this thin vertical slice process. ask me some questions about it.
When you're starting a project completely from scratch, what's the best way to break it up into stories and make acceptance criteria for each of those stories?
By not trying to do it all at the same time. So it's usually easier to start with the big stuff. You go, all right, what is this app? Well, the most important thing you should know about it is that it like shows Pokemon. Okay, well, let's start there. Then try to shape that a little bit. And it's an iterative process too. So what tends to happen is you go, all right, I'll have this D&D character generator app. Cool. So it generates characters. It lists all the characters you already have. It shows you options for stuff. It auto-calculates stuff. It has a randomization feature. So you just like start talking about it the way that, like, if you were designing the back of the box for this, like if you went to the store and bought the app that you're buying, what would the description be? Each of those features, that's a pretty good candidate for a user story. And so what tends to happen is you write all those out and then you realize, actually, this one is just kind of another way of looking at this one. These are really kind of the same thing. So we get rid of that one. Or we take this one and realize that this actually breaks down into like 3 different stories. Or this one really has 2 main parts to it that are independently valuable. So the blue squares end up being called epics. The red ones are user stories. And then you just keep decomposing those too if they're too big. And at some point, continuing to break the story down doesn't give you any new insight or information, or like stops being independently valuable to the user and is more like a series of development tasks. That means that you've broken it down far enough. And it's totally fine at that point within a story. You can say, set up the database, add the styles. You can have little like tasks for that. What you're not doing is confusing that for doing something that the user finds valuable. Good question. What else? All right, hopefully this was illuminating about how professional software tends to get made, maybe give you some ideas for your next project, how you can like take some of the stress off yourself while you're building this. Because that's the other thing. Not only is that, do you like continue, not only is this like a great way to work in priorities, but also time runs out. There's no scramble. There's no, go, but I have to do all the styling. You just abandon whatever you're currently working on and roll with what you got finished. So much less stress. Keep that in mind for capstones too. Because the people that take my advice on this in capstones, like, have no problem in those 2 weeks. It's the people who go, yeah, I know you said that in the lesson, but like the way that I like to do it is to like push all this shit over to the end. Those are the people who have a mental breakdown in the last week. Cool. I need to check on a couple of things. Hold tight for the modules lesson, but it's coming soon. Cheers.